He is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and his investigative work through the decades is remarkable. His books, his writings, also quite remarkable. I've mentioned this before when it comes to Trump, and it comes also to high-enders taking advantage of the tax system and of the American system as it relates to real estate and high-end holdings. You can crack any of David K. Johnston's books, and it's unbelievable. And the stories about Trump's life he's been documenting for so long. He's called a Trumpologist. In any case, co-founder of DCReport.org, he joins us on Tuesdays. He's the great David K. Johnston, everyone.
Hello, Mark.
Hello,
glad to be with you.
Yeah, really great to have you here. And wow, there's a lot going on. By the way, I have to ask you, because you're in Rochester, New York, so that was in the path of totality for the eclipse?
It was. Right now, there's a beautiful blue sky and 77 degrees. But yesterday, those clouds were so thick, there was probably more water in the clouds than over Lake Erie. And so there wasn't much to see. I was in Syracuse teaching, and there wasn't much to see. And my youngest child, Kate makes 8, brought 5 or 6 30-somethings up here from Manhattan, and didn't see much. My oldest son and my youngest grandson came up on his motorcycle, and they got here, and you got to sort of through the clouds see a little bit of the corona, maybe 15 or 20 degrees.
We went to Kansas City in 2017, and it was cloudy. It was cloudy. It broke for just a second. It was kind of a peekaboo type thing, but we know. And when you go that far, the disappointment is, you understand it's kind of baked in, but still.
Yep.
Hey, I want to first ask you about what is being talked about in the case of Donald Trump's bond, looking into whether there's really money there. He appeared to be bailed out, but now it's suggested that if there's not sufficient liquidity with the company that bailed him out, that posted the bond on his behalf, that they can actually begin seizing some of his properties and assets.
This could happen very quickly. There's two things going on here. Donald Trump and his lawyers represented to Judge Eric Engoron in New York in the persistent fraud case that it was impossible to obtain a $454 million or larger bond. They didn't name any of the companies they went to, but as a result, the Court of Appeal on its own, with going on nothing more than news accounts, reduced the bond to $175 million, which is not unknown when we're dealing with businesses. The Trump then came up with $175 million. Don Hankey, the Californian who put it up, he is most famous for making loans, subprime loans on crappy cars, and in violation of the law, seizing the cars of military members. There are rules that apply to them that are special and different from everybody else, and he's just run roughshod over them. He has been giving interviews, videotaped interviews, in which he says, oh, yeah, I told him I could give him the whole $454 million, no problem, and I was going to charge a low fee. Well, Donald's lawyers have a little bit of a problem here over misrepresentations to the court. Judge Engoron has ordered a hearing a week from Monday, so 13 days from now, into this and into the financing of this bond. And Mr. Hankey does not have a licensed enterprise in New York State. He was trying to use what essentially is an exchange used by insurance companies and bond companies to send money back and forth. So there may not be anything behind this. It could entirely be a fraud. And you can bet that on April 22nd, this will be thoroughly examined. And of course, on that day, Donald Trump will be in a different courtroom in Manhattan on criminal trial in the Stormy Daniels porn star case. And by the way, she does not want to be called an adult film actress. She wants to be called a porn star.
Wow, that's a fact I absolutely was unaware of. And I want to also double back to another fact. And that was the mention that you made of not being in the state of New York. You talked about the
Right.
bond company not being in the state of New York. Now, that's critical because it has to be in the state of New York?
Well, if you're not licensed to do business in a state, you can't do business in that state. And particularly where you're pledging to make a payment if it becomes necessary, how would the state of New York be able to enforce this?
I
They
see.
would have to go into, I mean, they could ultimately do so, but it would be difficult and complicated. The whole point of a bond is that when the time comes due, Donald loses his appeals, that the state can grab that money immediately and then go on to whatever else it needs to do to collect in full. And this is just sort of typical of the way Donald Trump does things. And of course, somebody in the comments pointed out that, yes, Don Hankey has been a character in South Park. I don't remember if it's what's in here, Christmas Pooh, but it's some kind of really despicable character.
Yeah, it's it's true, Mr. Hankey. You're absolutely right.
I can confirm it's Mr. Hankey.
Yes, Albert, who's a South Park devotee.
I just wasn't sure if it was the name of the right character. That's all.
Yeah. Jay Abrams says she wants to be called a porn star. I just love Stormy Daniels. Yeah, she steers right into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The question I have about well, I'm going to get to the stock in a second, but I want to ask you about a big deal. Now, Albert, did you get I wanted to play for David. I'm sure he's seen it, but really for the audience, the remarks that Trump made about abortion. He goes on Truth Social and he makes this huge pronouncement about abortion rights in this country. Do you have it, Albert, or not? Can you rally it for me?
Yeah, just give me one more minute.
Oh, okay. I thought it interesting, David, because he reminds all of those who need a reminder of what he did and how he stacked this court and how they have taken women's reproductive rights away. And then he tries to sort of split the baby, it seems, you know. Albert,
well, I think he's done much worse than split the baby here. One of the things to remember is that up until Trump, the people who are opposed to abortion, including the very most principled ones who are also against the death penalty and a number of other things, have never, ever suggested that women who seek an abortion should be criminally prosecuted. But Donald told the MSNBC host, whose name is escaping me at the moment, some years ago, 2015 or 16, that there must be punishment. And of course, now we're seeing that is coming out like crazy from the people who want to prevent or limit abortions. We've got bills introduced where a woman who has an abortion and the doctor or the nurses involved are subject to the death penalty. And we have states where there is no exception for the life of the mother. And, you know, I've actually been in the position of a doctor saying, you know, beating around the bush about it, but finally realizing what he wanted, you know, who's going to live and die if things continue to go badly in the delivery room? And that is a very solemn obligation, and it's none of the government's business to decide that. This is a medical and family decision, not a government policy decision.
Here is a bit of what Trump said. Go ahead, Albert.
Many people have asked me what my position is on abortion and abortion rights, especially since I was proudly the person responsible for the ending of something that all legal scholars, both sides, wanted and, in fact, demanded be ended. Roe v. Wade. They wanted it ended. It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that. My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land. In this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart, or in many cases, your religion or your faith. Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. Do what's right for our country and vote. So important to vote. At the
Okay.
end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's
Yeah, thank you, Albert. You know, David, he makes stuff up, the late term
Yeah.
abortion after the birth of the baby. I mean, it's craziness. I mean,
Well, first of all, he starts off saying everybody agrees about this. And that's not only not true, but the fact is very large majorities believe that we need to have the freedom to have terminated pregnancies. And we have, plenty of cases of the fetus is no longer viable. The fetus is actually dead, and you can't get an abortion. And we've had at least one case in the news recently where the medical opinion was that this woman will likely die if we don't remove this fetus. And under the law of that state, then you die. In fact, that's what I told my students when we talked about this yesterday. My lesson yesterday was about rights, and all the way back to the king of Persia in 579, Cyrus, up till today, that this idea that, oh, you're a woman, you got pregnant, things have gone bad, too bad, die. Oh, you were raped, you were gang raped, you got pregnant, oh, too bad, you have to die. This is outrageous, and there is not broad agreement in favor of that, and there is no killing babies, executing them after they're born. There certainly are procedures and times when in the process of childbirth, the child dies, but those are incredibly rare. There's a tiny percentage of abortions that are at the very end. And as I know from very deep personal experience, you can be faced with who's going to die here, the mother or the child. Well, the policy of some of the states and what Donald Trump just supported is you can both die, because we're not really about life. We're about controlling women and taking away their liberty.
I guess I thought, David, that he was trying to somehow modify his position based on what he clearly, realizes is hurting him. I mean, he knows that this issue, the A issue, is radioactive for him.
Yeah, I think he's trying to, and he got news coverage, as Rachel Maddow last night pointed out, quite well. He got news coverage that made it sound like he had a new and reasonable position. What he has is a new and very unreasonable position. And, this is a good example of journalists not carefully and critically thinking through what's happening and then calling experts about this, who could have said, well, saying every state will decide this and we'll have these different rules. Oh, okay. Well, so you get raped when you're 11 years old in this state by your father or your stepfather or your brother, or, one thing happens to you across the street, you're in a different state and it's a whole different set of rules. This doesn't make sense on that level, but particularly Trump's embrace of the idea, whatever the states do, that's the law of the land. No, you got to have some kind of principled position here about this. And I want to be very clear. My position is I don't care what stage of the proceeding we're at. It's none of the government's damn business, and don't bring the Bible up here, because the Bible doesn't help you. The Bible actually contains in the Old Testament a prescription for herbs to take to induce an abortion. And it also says that the fetus is not alive until it essentially begins kicking, which is well after these 6-week rules and 12-week rules. So I think Trump got lucky yesterday with a lot of bad news coverage that has put out the impression he wanted, not what he's actually saying.
Kim, you had something?
I'm struck by what you had said about what your personal experience was and how you said it's really nothing and no one's business but you and your family. Right. And then Trump comes on and he
by
says,
the way, it was only my decision to make because my wife was so drugged up. She couldn't consent.
Sure.
And this was long ago, and the doctors had not discussed with us or her what what to do if things go badly. Something all pregnant women should do with their doctors. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Kim.
But thank God you had choices there. So then Trump comes on and he says, at the end of his, it must be the state's decision. He says, well, it's use your heart and you make the best decision for your family. So he's telling me to make the best decision for my family. Meanwhile, he's taking away all the rights from which I have to make any of these decisions. And does nobody understand this?
He is talking out of both sides of his mouth, which he does all the time. And the coverage of this was just appalling, Mark. There's just, no two ways around this. It was appalling, and it's indicative of what's wrong with politics coverage in general, but especially in the last two and this current election cycle.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a good piece on the website that you co-founded, actually, about just that, about how do you cover politics these days. A guy named Dan Frumkin, he covers the press for DC Report, I think, and among other things.
No, he gave us permission to run this column. He doesn't work.
I see. Okay, I'm sorry.
He was a columnist for the Washington Post for several years, and the mandarins of Washington journalism, which is heavily based, on access, not checking out the record and understanding policy. They hate Dan with a passion, and we very much wanted to publish this piece. I hope people go to DC Report and read it. It's the headline is something like, the Washington Press Corps doesn't have a clue.
We'll put I'll tell you what, Albert, include a link to it if you would, please, in this video.
It doesn't have a freaking clue.
Yeah.
And the problem is, as Jay Rosen, who's a professor of journalism and a press critic, says, politics reporters are covering the odds. They should be covering the stakes. I mean, that's really the issue. We have a candidate who is very clear. He intends to end our democracy. You don't have to, be me to think that. All you have to do is listen to his own words. And that's not what's being focused on. And the atrocious coverage of his contradictory nonsense statements with its ridiculous claims on abortion is exactly a good example of that. And politics reporters have always been rewarded for covering the horse race. It's one of the reasons, and I tried it once in 1976 and went, I don't want anything to do with this. I understand why people want to do it as reporters. But, if you're on the campaign trail, one of the jobs is to listen very carefully to the candidate's stump speech and to catch any changes to see what they mean. With Donald, that's a full-time job just doing it, because he goes off script and he says bizarre things. But comparing, the speech you gave this morning to the one you gave yesterday afternoon to the one you gave the previous Saturday at night, that's just a core of that job, even by the standards of covering the horse race.
The idea somehow, well, of course, the horse race gets clicks and eyeballs and, oh my God, who's ahead, and the latest polls. And I succumb to it too. I mean, I look at the polls, and when I see a poll that looks like it's in a swing state or in an important place and it shows some change, I'll run with it as well. But what he does in this piece, and again, we'll link to it, is he talks about just the sort of blind eye that even the highest end, like New York Times political reporter, has turned toward the issues that you speak of.
What got Dan to write this column was that the New York Times hired someone to run this very popular political blog it publishes, and she goes, "We're going to have fun. It's going to be fun." Totally tone deaf in doing that. I noticed one thing in the commentary here. Andrew Peters asked the question, didn't I say Trump was going to go bankrupt a few weeks back? What I said was that he may well do this as a strategic matter to delay enforcement of the orders, particularly if he couldn't get the bonds. So I had always said on this show and elsewhere, my batting average for the last 9 years on Trump predictions has been 1.000. Perfect. Every time I step to the plate, I get on base. I've written more than 1,000 articles, so I'm now going to say 0.999. However, in the future, at some point, Donald will file personal bankruptcy, And when he does, I'm going to, a little asterisk, we're restoring my score to 1,000 if I don't get something else wrong.
Well, let me help you with the scorecard of people on the show. Andrew Peters is our designated troll, David. So do not take anything.
Yeah,
but he is.
that's okay.
No, me too.
Okay.
No, oh no, we deal with him. Please,
Yeah.
we don't X him out. I just wanted to designate him again.
But Andrew just needs to recognize I qualified what I said at the time. I said it would be strategic to cause delay. It won't prevent the ultimate payment. And he got the bonds, so he didn't do that. And by the way, I wasn't alone. And once I said this, other people, including George Conway, a very prominent Washington lawyer and classic Republican conservative, said they thought that was a very sound point. But we'll see. And I expect eventually this will happen, unless Trump.
David, I don't mean to interrupt, but if the judge rules that this bond is not backed up by the sufficient liquidity.
He might well then run and file bankruptcy.
There you go. I thought of you instantly when I saw that. I thought, oh my God, he is going to end up having to do it potentially.
Well, we'll wait and see.
Anyway, okay.
I didn't set a deadline for when he would do it, but I'll take the ding. I'm batting 999. Waiting for my $700 million contract with somebody.
Quickly about the stock, it continues to sink like a stone. The DJT stock. Are there issues with the company itself, David, that run afoul of the SEC?
Coming out. First of all, the stock's lost more than half of its value in less than 2 weeks. It peaked at just under $80, $79.38, and yesterday it was at 36, I think 38. Remember, this is a company had revenues of a touch over $4 million last year and a $58 million loss. It was put together through something called a SPAC, a Special Acquisition Corporation, where you don't have to do all the normal Securities and Exchange Commission filings like what are called S1s, statements. However, the Securities and Exchange Act has certain principles that apply in all matters. And the most important principle here is that you must disclose as material anything which a reasonable investor would need to know to decide whether to buy, sell, hold, or avoid a stock. Well, it's come out now in the last 2 weeks. Hugo Lowell at The Guardian has been in the forefront of this, that the company, before it went public, got an $8 million infusion of cash so that it wouldn't have to go out of business before the deal. The bank is a Caribbean bank owned by a guy with ties to the Kremlin, whose primary business is financing porn films. It may well be a Stormy Daniels film was financed by this guy's bank. And none of this was disclosed, and absolutely that meets the material information requirement of the Securities and Exchange Act. There will be inquiries into this, and there's going to be class action lawsuits over this. Just wait and pay attention. I see from Brian Jennings the price has gone up a little bit. It's at $37.02.
Yeah, well, that's a huge, wildly discounted.
Yeah, that would set the value of the company at somewhere between $3.5 and $4 billion. But a company with revenues of $4.1 million and that lost $58 million, it's not worth anything.
But I just want to follow up. What you're saying is that the investors didn't have access to the information that you've just talked about, and they should have.
That's correct. That's the rule about disclosure. That's why the companies have to disclose executive pay. And one of the reasons we know what we do about executive pay today is because 28 years ago, I was the lead reporter on the biggest enterprise project the New York Times has ever done. And I revealed all of these ways that executive pay was sort of hidden in the disclosures. It was there, but the journalists would just take the company announcements or they'd look quickly at the chart, and they were missing how things were being buried and put away in the in these filings. The most famous example being that the chairman of the Coca-Cola company had been front page news in 1991 when the Times revealed that he had been paid $98 million for 1 year of work. Well, 5 years later, I revealed that what no one knew at the time was that he only paid taxes on $2 million of that money, and that the shareholders had paid the taxes on the other $96 million, and would continue to be on the hook for it until he retired or died, which could be years in the future. As it turned out, he got lung cancer and died like a couple of years after that. But thousands of executives had these deals where they were forcing the shareholders to pay their taxes until they retired or resigned or were fired. Nobody knew that, even though I found it right in the record, just obscured.
I feel as though you touched on some of that in one of your books. There's a
Yes,
book about.
I do. Perfectly Legal talks about this.
Yeah, Perfectly Legal. That's it. Thank you. I
Somewhere
love
on
your
the
titles too.
shelf back there,
Quickly, as we finish, is the New York trial, Cheryl asks, going to be televised? I think the answer to that is no.
I don't believe so, but it will begin on Monday under Judge Marchand, and Donald has to be there for every second of the proceedings. So he'll be there Monday and Tuesday and Thursday and Friday. Wednesday, Judge Marchand holds a court for people who have criminal records because they're mentally ill. There was a superb story in the New York Times either Sunday or Monday about on the front page about how he runs this once a week court. So Donald will be there Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday, he can go campaign somewhere, but he's got to be back in the courtroom on Thursday. And this will be very interesting to watch. I'm sure he's going to campaign every day when he walks out saying, this is all rigged, etc.
Right. Yeah, he likes to play the hits. Last thing is Lindsey Graham. Wasn't it interesting to see Lindsey Graham? It seems like the bromance is over between those two.
I'm old enough to remember when Lindsey Graham said the guy's a kook and a racist and crazy and has no business being in the White House. And ever since then, he's been begging Donald to play golf with him, and they have. Donald, loyalty and support is entirely a one-way street, and we may well see that apply to his family.
Wow, that would be extraordinary.
Yeah.
He said Senator Lindsey Graham is doing a great disservice to the Republican Party and to our country. I blame myself for Lindsey Graham because I'm the only reason that he won in the great state of South Carolina because I endorsed him.
Well, I have to make a confession, Mark. The only reason I'm breathing right now is Donald. I mean, it's his power and majesty that allows me to inhale and exhale.
Well, he is being compared to deity, as you know, in a lot of their stuff.
He calls himself effectively a deity. He says, "I alone can save you."
It's great work if you can get it. Hey, David K. Johnston, thanks for all your time. We'll link to that piece in DC Report and watch for you.
And I'm sorry I can't be with you next week when the day after the trial, I'm going to be in Manhattan, unfortunately, and doing something I can't be with you. But 2 weeks from today, we'll be back.
Look forward to that.
Maybe sooner if something big happens.
Yeah, please do let us know. We'd love you anytime. Thanks, David K. Johnston. David K. Johnston, everybody. So long, my friend. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.